So let's talk a little more about that absolute disgrace that occurred on Friday in the Oval Office. I don't think a lot of people understand or fully grasp yet what happened. That moment in the Oval Office was one of those moments that are a turning point in history. And I know that some of you get it, a lot of you probably get it in this audience, but a lot of people out there simply have no friggin' clue. Even if they think that what happened was disgraceful, they don't fully understand what this means. There was what existed prior to that moment and now subsequent to that moment. And the world is completely different now after that moment. Right now, in Great Britain, leaders of the free world, of which the United States is no longer a member, we're not a part of that group. We are not one of the leaders of the free world anymore. We certainly aren't the leader of the free world anymore, because in that moment on Friday, the United States, acting through its criminal president, announced to the world that we no longer stand with the free world. And we by no means seek to lead the free world. We stand now apart from the free world. And not just apart from the free world, but in opposition to the free world. We now stand with Vladimir Putin. We are now we are one of the bad guys now. That's what we are now. We are now on the wrong side. We have chosen, again, not all of us, obviously. We didn't vote for this shit. But the United States, acting through its criminal president, has chosen the side of evil. That's where we are now. And those world leaders, those leaders of the free world, are now meeting in Europe and making plans for the post-American-led free world. They have to figure out how to go it alone without us, because they need to think about their own safety, their own security. And they know that to best achieve their own security, they must divorce themselves to an extent from the United States. And we are going to suffer greatly as a result. And the United States is going to become much more at risk. The entire world is now going to become much more dangerous. Let me give you an example why, or explain why, in part. And it's largely the story of how we got here where we are, where in the Oval Office, Donald Trump changed the course of world history. Ukraine was once part of the former Soviet Union. And in 1994, it was the third biggest holder of nuclear weapons. Ukraine had the third biggest nuclear weapons stockpile in the world. And in exchange for giving up their nuclear weapons, the United States, Great Britain, and Russia guaranteed the safety of Ukraine. In fact, you know what? Let us hear exactly this explanation and why it will now be so dangerous for the world from our current Secretary of State, little Marco Rubio, who used to understand all this stuff. And if we're going to be honest about it, he still does understand all this stuff. But he decided to sell out his country, everything he knew to be true, every value, every principle he ever pretended to have, for his own personal ambition. And decided to kiss Donald Trump's ass, and now he has abandoned all this. But he once knew, and again, he still does, know the truth about all of this. So listen right now to little Marco Rubio.
When the Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, Ukraine was left with the world's third largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons on the planet. But they signed this agreement with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia that basically said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we, these three countries that signed to this, will provide for your defense and assure you of your defense. And so Ukraine did that. They gave up these weapons. Well, now, this was signed in 1994, 20 years later, one of the three countries that signed that agreement hasn't just not provided for their defense, they actually invaded them. And I want to make a point on this for a second. Think about if you're one of these other countries around the world right now that feels threatened by your neighbors. And the United States and the rest of the world are going to you and saying, listen, don't develop nuclear weapons. Don't develop nuclear weapons, South Korea. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Japan. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia. We will protect you. We will watch out for you. What kind of lesson do you think this instance sends to them? I think the message this is sending to many nations around the world is perhaps we can no longer count on the security promises made by the free world. Perhaps we need to start looking out for ourselves. And that's why the Ukrainian situation is so much more important than simply what's happening in Europe. This has implications around the world.
So little Marco had it exactly right. And this is why the world is now a much more dangerous place. Because not only does Putin feel emboldened, and he is making new threats. He is now making threats against Great Britain right now. Anyway, not only does he feel empowered, but other countries around the world feel less secure, and they know they can't count on the United States, either as an ally to any degree, or certainly for their security. So they are going to feel the need to arm up. So we are going to have a new arms race around the world among other countries who used to feel that the United States would be there for them and now know that we will not. And many of those countries will take steps to acquire for themselves nuclear weapons, and we will have a new nuclear arms race around the world. And if you think that that does not make the world, including the United States, much more at risk, and that this world is now a much more dangerous place, then you are an idiot. Now, a couple more things about this. This whole thing on Friday was obviously scripted and planned. It is obvious that that was the case for a whole host of reasons. Number one, you had the vice president, J.D. Vance, just ready, looking for a moment to pounce on Zelensky. Now, notice that I said that J.D. Vance is vice president. Zelensky is a president. He is a head of state. He was our invited guest. Normally, vice presidents don't say shit in those meetings other than maybe the formal pleasantries. They certainly don't insert themselves into the conversation between the two heads of state, and they definitely do not insert themselves to insult the president of a foreign government who we have invited as our guest. So the fact that he did that tells you this was a setup. There are other reasons to know it was a setup. Like that jackass, I don't know his name, who insulted Zelensky about his clothing. You don't own a suit? You don't wear a suit? You come here and you insult all of us by not wearing a suit? That guy, who I understand is Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, okay, that guy was not there by accident. And there's no way in the world that in an Oval Office meeting between the president of the United States and the president of Ukraine would this nobody jackass say something like that, insult the president of Ukraine without Donald Trump's full knowledge that he was going to do exactly that. So this was obviously a setup. And yet we have people on the MAGA right too stupid to understand any of this. Too stupid to understand that this was all a setup. Too stupid to understand what this means for the world, how this puts us all at risk. And let me give you just a short example. Here is a video. I'm going to show you a video clip. This is a guy named Dave Portnoy. Only reason I'm playing this is because I just came across it. It's a very short clip. This guy is president of Barstool Sports. He is one of these, podcast bros. I don't know if he actually has a podcast or what, but he's part of this bro culture. Elon Musk, not Elon Musk. What the fuck? Why am I saying Elon Musk? What is his name? Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan. Part of that whole bro culture. Joe Rogan, Dave Portnoy. It's the same idiot energy. Anyways, take a look at this clip from Dave Portnoy.
If you're just here for the pizza reviews, keep it moving. I had to talk about this meeting with Zelensky, Trump, J.D. Vance at the White House. Felt like I was watching Bravo TV. But I think Trump and Vance handled this as well as they could. Like, we're not going to just get steamrolled by Zelensky at the expense of getting a deal done. And if that means we have to throw a couple flowers at Putin, so be it.
So there's Dave Portnoy. Now, keep in mind who this guy is. His biggest claim to fame, and he has amassed millions of followers online, largely for doing pizza reviews. Okay? And in fact, he referenced that in the middle of the videos. He said, if you're here for a pizza review, keep on scrolling, or whatever he said. Because that's largely what people listen to Dave Portnoy for. He takes a camera guy, he goes to a pizza shop, he gets a regular cheese pizza, he comes out, he eats it on the sidewalk, and he tells you what he thinks of it. And he has millions of people who watch him for his stupid pizza commentary. And apparently, being a cheese pizza aficionado somehow makes him also an expert on foreign policy and diplomacy. And so he just felt the need to tell us all what he thinks, because he has very deep and important thoughts about this. And what he tells us, what did this idiot tell us? Oh, that Trump and Vance handled this about as well as they could have. So obviously this idiot is of the belief that they had this serious meeting and then Zelensky just went off saying all kinds of crazy shit, attacking Trump and Zelensky, and Trump and Vance, and Trump and Vance handled that about as well as they could have, given the circumstances. That Zelensky's off the hook. Zelensky is making all kinds of demands on the United States, and so Trump and Vance handled it as well as they could have. This idiot is too stupid to realize it was obviously a setup from the beginning, but Dave Portnoy doesn't understand that. And what else did this idiot say? Oh, yeah. And the reason why what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance did was so good was because, even though it was a shit show or whatever, he thought he felt like he was watching Bravo TV, whatever this guy said. But we're not going to allow Zelensky to steamroll us at the expense of getting a deal. First of all, what the hell did Zelensky do to try to steamroll us? All right? What set this whole thing off? First, it was J.D. Vance insulting Zelensky by saying, "Oh, you didn't say thank you." And about that thank you, who's he supposed to say thank you to? He's thanked the American people profusely. Sorry, I'm getting a text. I'm going to ignore that. He's already thanked the American people profusely. But besides that, these two people, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, J.D. Vance voted against helping Ukraine. So if it was up to J.D. Vance, we would not have helped Ukraine at all. And Donald Trump was opposed any aid to Ukraine. So what the hell is Zelensky supposed to personally thank these two for? They didn't even want to help him. All right, putting that aside, what was it? Let's just because I got to wrap this up. What was this about? Because Dave Portnoy, genius that he is, fails to grasp what this is actually about. Again, this was a setup. So why? Why set this up? Because this was to give the pretext. It was to give a reason, a pretextual reason for Donald Trump to abandon Ukraine, abandon Zelensky, get his cult to completely oppose any aid going to Ukraine, because that's what Putin wants. That is what Putin paid for. He paid for us to abandon Ukraine, and so that is what Donald Trump is doing. Furthermore, it sets the stage to take the next step. After we completely abandon Ukraine, it's to take the next step of pulling us out of NATO. And I know some people say, well, by law, he can't unilaterally pull us out of NATO. It would take Congress also pulling us out of NATO. Who gives a shit? How many laws is Donald Trump ignoring right now? And by the way, whether we're officially pulled out of NATO makes little difference. Donald Trump won't honor our commitments to our NATO allies. So it doesn't matter if we're officially pulled out of NATO or not. He's not going to honor those commitments. So functionally, there's no difference between formally pulling out and just completely abandoning them as Donald Trump is going to do. And as a matter of fact, speaking of Elon Musk is out there now tweeting that we need to pull out of NATO. He's not doing that without the approval of Donald Trump either. That's all part of the plan. That's laying the groundwork. It's coming. Trump is going to pull us out of NATO. And if you want to talk about making this world more dangerous, pulling us out of NATO is going to make this much more dangerous. You know, the idiots who voted for this guy and still defend this guy don't get what the hell they have done to this country and to the world. They have put us on the path to World War III. That piece of shit Donald Trump is lecturing Volodymyr Zelensky and they're saying, you're gambling with World War III. It is Donald Trump who is putting this world on a path to World War III. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. I got to go before I blow a blood vessel. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.